Guys, thank you all very much for coming to the Power BI Meetup group. So for those of you that are new, it's part of the Microsoft Power BI User Group program. It was formed in late 2022 by myself, Flavio and John Lunn. Our first meetup in February 2023. We always meet up in central Birmingham. This has become a bit of a common theme at the moment, but we are always open to hosting locations. So why attend? So it's a great way to network, grow your skills and discover opportunities, share best practices, practical takeaways and real-world success stories. And we aim to help users find efficiencies and productivity, giving them a professional edge when they go out to market. So in terms of recruitment, just talk shop for 10 seconds. So if anyone's looking for a new role or if anyone's looking to recruit, if you want to come and find myself, I'll be more than happy to speak to you about both interim and permanent opportunities and provide any market knowledge. So after I've just done the quick intro, we'll be kicking off with Chandeep. We'll be doing Power Query beyond the user interface. We'll have a short break and then we'll be getting in with Sarah, who will be doing Elevate user confidence with automated testing in Power BI. In terms of the next few events, we probably will host them here, but we just need to confirm the speakers. So just keep an eye out on the meetup for that. And yeah, as I said, look, if anyone knows anyone that would be interested in speaking, especially, we've done lightning talks recently, so we like to encourage guys who have maybe been coming to the events for a couple of years, who that have something interesting to speak about. Please do come and find me. Let you take this one.
Yeah, I asked Matt about this slide last minute. So there's this data viz competition going on. So I thought we'd make this announcement. If anyone wants to take part, the theme is very interesting. It's a team I've never heard before. So if you want to take part in the competition, it's totally free. I believe there's some prizes or awards they mentioned on the website. We should send the link.
Yeah, so that we can send it out on the after.
So if you go in the Fabric community, this data viz contest is going on. We're all welcome to join and then present it here in the meetup if you win. Good luck.
Right, so yeah, thank you all for coming. And I'll hand you over to Chandeep. Chandeep, I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay. A little show of hands is going to be nice.
Can you hear me okay?
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Okay. All right. So good to be here after a lot of to and fro. I was in London in the month of Feb. Unfortunately, I could not speak at that time, and then we cancelled one more time, but I'm happy to come here and speak. Although it's night in India, it's 10:30 in the night, but I've had coffee, so I'm all right. Anyways, I have actually dealt with a lot of shitty data while working with Power BI. So much so that I had to force myself to learn the M language, which does not look pretty, by the way. It's very, very gnarly. And one problem after the other, I was surprised that I was solving a lot more complicated problems. And I was even more surprised that a lot of people were facing the same problems. One video after the other, I somehow got into the niche of solving problems beyond the user interface through my YouTube channel. I don't know how many of you know that, but I run a YouTube channel named Goodly. That's spelled as Goodly. And somehow I also woke up quite a lot of mornings at 4 a.m. and I happened to write a book, which is Power Query Beyond the User Interface, titled the same as this session. My question to all of you is, how many of you work with Power Query to begin with? Could you please raise your hands? Okay, almost all of you. Okay, cool. How many of you have moved past the user interface and you also sufficiently write the M language? Raise your hands. Few of you. And the rest are the user interface people. You mostly click the buttons and you get the stuff done. Is that so? Raise your hands. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to be talking about is things that we can do in Power Query, which are not the clicking of the buttons, but beyond that. And I'm going to be showing some tricks. And let's just see if you have any questions. So my session is going to be like 5 or 6 tricks. I'll move in a structured way. I will respect people who have never worked with the M language before. I will go slow. I will explain the concepts. And if you have any questions, you can ask them towards the end of the session. I'll be speaking for about 30 odd minutes, and then the floor is yours. You can ask me questions. Let me go ahead and start. All right. I hope you can take a look at my screen. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. There is some data, but we're not going to work with this data for the moment. I am just going to open up Power Query. So now there is a data type in Power Query called a record. You can see my screen all right?
Yeah.
Pretty zoomed in actually. Okay. There is a data type in Power Query called a record. And if you want to understand what a record is, if you have a table and the table has some headers, let's just say this is column number 1, this is column number 2, and this is column number 3. The rows of that table are nothing but records. So let's say this is the first row of the data, the second row of the data, and the third row of the data. So I would say that there are 3 records in the table. That's what a record is. The first record, the second record, and the third record. And when you look at records, you're not looking at individual rows, you are actually looking at records in terms of pairs. So the row, which is let's say this particular row or the second record, is going to come along with the values, which are somewhere here, whatever values, text, numbers, whatever that is, and along with the column header. So record is always in pairs. It is the value of the row and the headers of the column. That's how what a record is going to look like. If I were to real quick let's say load one particular table in Power Query, it looks something like this. If I click on the side of any row number, so let's just say that I click on row number 2, what I've done is I've essentially clicked on the second record, technically the first record because the counting starts with 0. So let's say the second record. And this particular record not only shows me the values, so it's showing me B, showing me an order date, a due date, and a value, but it's also showing me all the column headers right here. So remember that a record is nothing but a pair of 2 things, the values as well as the column headers. Good to go. All right. The next thing is that surprisingly, although the record is nothing but the row of the table, it's pretty much horizontal when we take a look at the record, but somehow it appears vertical in Power Query. It appears like this, top to bottom. I don't know why is that the case, but that's how the record appears. But this does not change the behavior of the record, right? Okay. Once you have understood the record, let's just see how can we create a record if you want to create a record from scratch. So I'm going to go over and make a new query, other sources and a blank query, and I'm going to start creating a record. Now, records, if you want to create them, they are always initiated in a square bracket. So you are going to start writing a square bracket, and then you will end the square bracket, and within which you will create a record. Now, like I said, record is going to have 2 parts. You will have the name of the column. So let's just give this a column name. So let's just say C1 is the name of my column, and I give it a value. Let's say my name. Now, because my name is a text, I'm going to wrap that in the quotation marks. And I'm going to maybe create a second column. So call this as C2 and perhaps write my city. So I'm at the moment based out in Gurgaon. And if I now commit on this record structure, I am actually going to get a record. Now notice that even though I wrote the column C1 and C2, which might appear like a text string, I did not have to wrap that around in the quotation marks or any special way. How? Even if you were to give a space here, it is still going to be okay, just as the way that you typically write it. Only when you write a special character or something, you would have to do something like this, which makes Power Query ugly to take a look at. So, oops, that. You have a special character, and then you have to do that pound sign and the wrapping of the quotation marks and things like that. So that is the structure of the record. Let me just come back to the usual way of writing column 1, and I'm going to write here as column number 2. So like I said, quick summary of the record. You declare a record in a square bracket. You write the names of the columns. You write the value of the columns, separate them with a comma, and you can do as many pairs as possible. Column value pairs. Good to go? All right. With that understanding, let's just see what can we do with a record? Like, show me how is it useful, right? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the query. Let's just see. Yeah, okay, fine. Let's just work with this particular data. If you take a look at the data is like ridiculously simple. We just have 4 columns. We have the product column, the order date column, the due date column, and the value column. How many of you have worked with this particular feature, which is where you go to the Add Columns tab and you make custom columns in Power Query? Nice, nice. Imagine for a second, you need not 1 custom column, but perhaps 3 custom columns. Obviously, you're going to come for every single operation of creating a custom column and click here 3 times to make 3 custom columns. And you will have added custom 1, added custom 2, and added custom 3 right here, isn't it? Isn't it? Can we just do all of that in one go? The answer is a record. Let's just start. So let's just say that 3 columns that I want to create are such. The first column that I want to create is perhaps, let's say, delays, a delay, right? Which is nothing but due date minus the order date, or let's say duration. Let's just call this as duration. So the first column that I want to create is duration, which is the difference of the order date and the due date. That's my first column. The second column that I want to create is a commission, which is right here, this particular column. And the third column that I want to create, let's just see what do I have in my notes. And I want to create a ship date as well, which is where I will take my order date and add 20 days to that, right? That's what I want to create. So 3 columns, a ship date, the duration between the order date and the due date, as well as a commission, which is where I'm giving some percentage of the value. Let's just see how can we do that using a record. I'm going to go over to the Add Columns tab, make a custom column, and I will zoom that right in, and I'll show that to you how this is done. Like I said, a record is created in a square bracket. So I will start the square bracket and I will end the square bracket so that I don't forget it towards the end. That's my record. Within the record, I will start to create my first column. Let's just give this a column a name. So I'm going to say, hey, the first column that I want to create is days. And the days is going to be, let's say, the difference of the order date, the difference of the due date minus the order date. Now, the thing is that you just can't take a date value and subtract it like this. Power Query doesn't like it. So what you have to do is you have to tell Power Query, hey, Power Query, you know what, I'm working with dates and consider them as dates and then try to do that subtraction operation. So there happens to be a function, which is where I can wrap this entire formula in that, and that is called, what's that called? Duration. Let me see. I forgot the formula. Duration.days. Okay, so duration.days, you write the larger date first, you write the smaller date after that, and then you kind of close the bracket. Now, this is nothing but a record, and in the record, I created a column and I mentioned the formula to be able to calculate that. I'm still following my pattern. Then I go ahead and create the second record. I put in a comma here and I make my second record. Call this as commission. And the commission is going to be take my value, which is right here, and why don't you multiply that with a 10%? Then I put in a comma and I make the third column of the record, which is nothing but my ship date. So ship date. And you can see that the ship date has got a space in between, and I have done nothing special to write that. So ship date is going to be, hey, why don't you take your order date and add 20 days to that, because that's when we typically take to ship. Now, just as the way Power Query doesn't like subtraction of the dates, it also doesn't like addition of the dates. So we need to do something special. So that special is nothing but a formula that can add days to a date. And that formula is date.addDays, I guess. Yeah, date.addDays. I start the bracket, I close the bracket. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what we have been able to do so far is that we have written the logic of creating 3 columns into a record with the name of the column and the value, which could be a formula or a single value, the name of the column and the value, the name of the column and the value. That's all that we have done. Now, I'm going to come back and I'm going to click on OK. Like I expect, it gives me a record. And guess what? Records have the natural behavior of being expanded. Now, if I click on the expand button and I uncheck the name prefix, I have all the columns and I click on OK, and I have added 3 columns in just one go. There is an error here, which we can figure it out in a bit, but we have added 3 columns in just one go. Now, you could have said that, hey, I could have created 3 added custom steps, so 1, 2, and 3, but now the sky is the limit. If you want to create 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 additional columns in your query, you can write all of those columns in the record and you can just expand them once and all of the columns are created. That is the beauty of a record. That's application number 1. Any questions here?
I have 2.
Yes, please.
Is there a performance implication in terms of doing these 3 calculations as a record?
I've done that a lot, but I haven't seen any degradation. I can't say for sure that this improves the performance, but I haven't seen any degradation.
And then the second part is, if you were to do something like this, does it break query properly?
Good question. I haven't tested it out. I haven't tested it out for that. Any other thing?
Yeah,
Yes, please.
You create a transform file when you're creating the expand step. So is there another query that's automatically being created in your queries pane?
Are you saying that can I do this operation in the transform file? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying if you expand the queries pane, does it automatically create a transform file as a result of
No, it
expanding?
doesn't.
Doesn't.
Nothing. Nothing. So if you take a look, guys, I'm still working with the queries that I created initially. There's nothing that is created here. So typically, the transform file is created when you're trying to combine data from multiple Excel files, and it creates a function, creates a bunch of queries right here, and that creates that. But at the moment, what you just did was you made a record in a single column and you just expanded it. That's all that we did. Right? And the logic can be as complicated as you would like, and all of this is kind of good to go. Can we proceed? All right. Let me show you another thing. So I'm actually going to go ahead and duplicate this particular query and delete the steps of it and delete all of this part. Oops. And bring another piece of data, which is something like this. All right. So now I'm working with another piece of data, and this data is pivoted, by the way. So if you take a look, the way I read number 14 is that I look up on the top and I say, oh, this is the month of Jan. I look up on the left and I say, oh, this is product C. And only when I look in the cross-tabulated direction, I'm able to make sense of the number that is. Whenever you have cross-tab data, you're looking up and you're looking left. Typically, you are in a mess and your data is going to be pivoted. That's the way to identify that. Now, be that as it may, but what I want to do is, I don't want to unpivot the data. What I want to do is, I just want to add a totals column on the far right. Perhaps I don't even want to load it into Power BI or do something with it. I just want to add a totals column on the right. It could be a peculiar behavior that you're trying to do, but that's what you're trying to do. Now, if you are the conventional type, what you're going to do is you're going to unpivot the data, group the data, and do a bunch of stuff to be able to add the totals. I'm not saying you can't do that using the user interface. You can, but there is an easier way. And the answer to that is a record. I know you guys have had a beer, but that's fine. The answer to that is a record. A record. All right. All right. So let me just try to understand. Let me just try to help you understand what am I trying to do here. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to go inside every single row of the table. So I want to go in the first row of the table. Then I want to go in the second row of the table. And once I step inside the row of the table, I want to fetch all of these values flowing towards the right, and I want to sum them. Then I want to go to the second row, catch all of these values, and then sum them. That's what I'm trying to do. So if I'm trying to step inside every single row, obviously I have to work with something called as a record. Let me show you how. So I'm going to go over to the Add Columns tab because I'm trying to create a new column. So I'm going to go over to the Add Columns tab and make a custom column. And let's just call this column as total. Now, before I do stuff, how many of you have seen Power Query writing this weird syntax called each underscore? And you have scratched your head always, what the heck is it? Anyone? You've written you've seen the code somewhere in the formula bar. It says each underscore something, but you've never been able to make sense of it. What is that? Anyone? Just one? No? Okay, cool. That's fine. For the rest of you, you're going to be okay because I'm going to tell you something and you will have to believe it. Okay. All right, please take a look. These are the questions. These are the people who can probably ask me a question. But for the rest of you, if you've not seen the each and the underscore, it's unlikely that you will ask me a question. But please take a look. So the question at the moment is that, what should I write here? What should I write here that actually gives me access to the first row? Then it gives me access to the second row. Then it gives me access to the third row, so on and so forth. And the answer to that is an underscore. So if I just happen to write an underscore here, it actually goes ahead and creates a record like you would expect. And the record has got all the values of the first row. But hey, the record doesn't come with the values only. It comes with the column names and everything. Right. Now, I'm going to skip the part about the each and the underscore, that why did it happen? How did it happen? Why the underscore? All of that. But for now, I am saying if you happen to create a new column and if you happen to just write the underscore, what it is going to do is it's going to fetch the row and give it to you as the way it is all I'm saying, right? Okay, with that understanding out of the way, the problem that I'm dealing with at the moment is that I can't work with the record because the record contains some junk stuff that I don't need. If I want to sum these numbers, then these are the numbers that I need. I don't need Jan, Feb, March, so I want to get rid of that. I don't need the first value, I want to get rid of that. So I need to get rid of all of these column names, and I want to get rid of the alphabet A. There are two problems to solve. And once I'm left with the values only, I can sum them up. Are you with me? So what do? I'm going to go back to the record and start playing around with the record. And I'm going to say, hey, record, you come with pairs, the value and the column, but I'm not interested in the column name. So let me strip you from the names of the columns. That's English, but how do you say that in M? You'd convert the record into a list. So I write record.toList, and I start the bracket, I close the bracket in the end. This is my record, and I'm converting that to a list. List does not come with column headers. It just has the values. So if I now go ahead and take a look at my formula, the record got transformed into a list. If I peek inside of the list, I have solved the first problem and the column headers are gone. Now comes the second problem. What do I do about this? A, I can't sum the A thing. So I'm gonna kind of skip the first item of the list, like just skip it, because I know that the first column is just the product name. I can just skip it. So I can say, hey list, I want to skip the first item. So I can use a function list.skip, start the bracket, close the bracket. Now, if you don't write any parameter inside the list.skip, it skips the first character automatically. But if you write this list.skip, 2, it will skip now the first 2 characters or first 3 characters, so on and so forth. So I'm not writing it. It just by default skips the first character, and I'm good to go with that. I'm going to click on OK. And that's what I get. I get a list, which is now containing only the numbers that I wanted. What do I do next? As you would expect, I will just sum the list. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to say, hey, I want to sum this list. So list.sum, wrap that list inside of this, and we are good to go. And that is nothing but your total. One step. Not unpivoting, not like doing 50 steps to get to that, just one step. That's it. Any questions?
People are in awe.
Yes, please.
What if you get the end not
I can't hear you. What if you, and then I
Keep
not
the
hear
step,
Ripley.
the last item of the list instead of the first. One in the middle.
You sorted.
You were saying that, what if I want to skip a middle item of the list, something like that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
or the last?
Cool. Now I can further that up with more complexities. And I can say that, hey, there is a real possibility that this cell could be an error, or this cell could be an alphabet, like a B or something. And I just want to sum the numbers. So you can literally pick and choose which values to sum. Now, to answer your question, if you want to skip the last item off the list, there is a function for that. I think it's called remove last n items, something like that. There's a function for that, and you can remove the last n items instead of skipping the first items. But what you can do is you can also write a condition where you skip the items which are non-numbers, or sorry, which are numbers. Sorry, you can skip the items which are texts, and you can keep the items which are numbers, and then you can sum it up. In that condition, we'll have to write a filter condition, which is where it keeps taking a look at every single number and evaluates if it's a number or not, and then it skips those numbers which are not numbers. Slightly complicated, but we can do that for sure. Okay. I have it in the book though. That's a great line to market my book. I have it in my book. Okay, I have it in my book. Okay. Anyways, please take a look further up. Any more questions before we move ahead?
Okay for now, thanks.
Okay. If you were feeling a little tipsy after that single beer, this is going to literally wake you up, like literally wake you up. Okay, hear me out. How many of you have this need that you wanted to extract a step off of the steps that you've created? You know how to make steps in Power Query, all of these steps. And when you reference this particular query, so if I just go ahead, right click, and I say new query, and I make a blank query right here, I can obviously say equals, and I can say equals to data. I can say that. But the problem is that the step that is going to be shown, or the result that is going to be shown here when I reference the query data, is going to be the last step of the data, not an intermediate step. So I would probably get this step, this one, not the source, not any one of the intermediate steps. How many of you have had the need to extract one of the intermediate steps of the query, for which you have broken the queries, you've done some stuff, and you've tried to figure it out, but it's hard? The answer to that is, come on, guys, you know the drill now. Record. Okay, cool. Record. Okay, cool. So here's how we do it. So I'm going to create a bunch of steps here just to kind of make my query a bit longer so that it makes a little more sense. So let's just say that this particular totals column was not created by records and it was done using the UI of the Power Query, right? So help me out here. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this particular query, and I'm going to call this query as my totals. And I'm going to delete this particular step. I'm going to right click and I'm going to unpivot other columns. That's good. Now, what do? I do a group by, and I do advanced. And what do I do here? I click on OK. And actually, I can do a sum here. And I can say, hey, I want to sum the value column. Click on OK. And here is a sum. But I can create one more column. I'm just creating more steps here. And no, delete that, add the aggregation total, all rows, all rows, and then I can say keep the all rows. That's the table. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep these two columns, right click and remove other columns, and I'm going to expand this particular table, click on OK, and I'm going to repivot the table and to have it in the same shape. But for now, I've been able to create a bunch of steps, and I would like to go ahead with these steps. Now, let's say, for example, I make a new query. I make this query, query 1, and I'm just trying to reference the totals query right here. If I press enter, what I get is the last step of this particular query, the last step, the very last step. But I don't want to get the last step. I maybe want to get this particular step, the group row step. That's what I want to get, one of the intermediate steps. So what do? I'm going to go ahead and change the structure of the query. I'm going to go over to the View tab and click on the Advanced Editor and zoom in just to show you how am I going to change the structure. Now, every single query that you write, even if you have not been into the Advanced Editor ever before, probably you know that it's between the let and the in statement. So you start the query with the let statement, you end the query with the in statement, and you pull the last step out like this. That's what the queries are written, right? Now, can somebody help me revise the structure of a record? A record is always in pairs. You have the column name and then you have the value of the column, isn't it? So I'm going to delete the let, watch carefully. I'm going to delete the in, and I'm also going to delete the extracted step right here. These are all my steps. Now, see the magic. If I rewind the basics of the record, a record is made up of the column name and the value of the column, comma, next column name and the value of the column, next column name and the value of the column, so on and so forth. The name of the column could be anything. All that I would want is surround that in the square bracket to begin with and end that in the square bracket. And that's it. This entire query is now transformed into, guess what? A record. That's it. Now what do? I'm going to come out of it, click on done, and you get a record. And every single column of the record now holds the table like this. Watch this. If I now go to the totals query, I'm referencing the totals query right here. And now I can pull up any step. I can pull up this particular step. So I can click on that table. And now from this particular query, which is a record, I have referenced it here, right here. And I have actually extracted the third step of the query. Can you believe it? Questions? I'm sure you have it.
Have you tried to use the meta keywords to achieve
That's the
something?
next. Yeah, that's the next one. That's the next one for sure. I was thinking that people are going to be dissatisfied. They're gonna call me out. This is shit. This is bad. And then probably I will say that, okay, there's a better way of doing this. Any questions?
Yeah, people want to see the next one.
Okay, cool. So the problem is, if you haven't realized, the problem is this was a working query and I completely obliterated it. Like you can't load this query into Power BI or can't make use of it. It's a record now. The result is here and it's captured in a cell of the record. You can't work with it. You can reference it, but you can't work with it. So although impressive, the record trick is impressive, but not quite useful. Like it just damages my query. So I want to have the query the same way, like the way it is typically, but I still want to be able to reference a step. Let's just see how can we do that. For which I'm going to go back to the query. So View, Advanced Editor, and I'm going to reinstate the query like the way it was. And the way it was is that it started off with a let statement, no square bracket let, and it ended up with an end statement. And after that, it had the last step copied and pasted right here. That was the query, isn't it? And if I now click on done just to test it out, it just works the normal way like you would expect. But I'm going to add a meta. Think of meta as remember this. That's the casual way of saying it. think of meta as remember this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to say in the last step, I'm going to say, hey, meta, not meet, but meta. And in the meta, I will declare a record. I can give a column name, any column name, doesn't matter. So let's just call this as C for column name. And what I want the query to remember on the last step, what I want the query to remember is nothing but the step that I want to extract, which is group rows. So I will just take that, Control C, and feed that in the column that I have created. So read it something like this, although technical, but read it like this. Hey, when you're done doing all of this code and all of that, then remember, I am creating a record, and in the record, I am storing the group row step. Just remember it. Don't show it to me. Just remember it. Now, is this going to change something? The answer is no, and you have the same query, and it just works fine. But I can actually go back to query number 1, and I can say, hey, I still want to reference my totals query. And the totals query is going to give me the last step, which is expanded rows. But in the last step, I asked it to remember something. How do I ask it to extract what it remembered? So I'm going to go right here to this particular query, and I'm going to say, hey, in the meta, I asked you to store something, and I want to retrieve it. The formula for that is value.metadata. And I'm going to start the bracket and then write the totals. So I'm just asking you to extract my meta that I fed in that last step of the query. I press enter, and you can see that here is the step that you asked it to remember, which is nothing but group rows. If you click on it, you have an intermediate step extracted of a query without actually breaking the query. Questions? Yes, please.
How many steps can you store, and does it have to be at the end? I think that's two
How many
questions.
steps can you store, and does it have to be what?
When you store the metadata, does it have to be at the end?
Yes, it has to be in the end, because what happens is that if you think about it, you are in the first step of the query, which is query 1, you are referencing totals. So the totals is by default going to throw the last step of the query. If you take a look at the query, what you're going to get by default is this step. And that is the reason why in the last step, I asked it to remember the meta. That's the reason why. Now, good question. Right now, I hard-coded the name of the step. Good observation. But what if I wanted to make it dynamic? Like I want the user to select the step. Like you can reference it, but it can give you all the steps of the query and you can then reference it. There are some caveats to that. One of the caveat is that I know the trick, but I don't remember it right now. So if you would want me to play around with this, I can just figure it out in 5 minutes. Let me just try. There is something which is, so I'm going to create, let's say, an R. Let me see if I can do that. I can say R, and this is nothing but my record. And I can see, and I can just write the R itself. And then I can return the R. I hope that's going to work. Let's just see. R was not recognized. Okay, let's see. R is giving me this. A record. Is there? Okay, R and let me see if that is going to work. make sure it's spelled correctly. I can see the R. It's there. I've done. It's there on my YouTube, but I've actually forgotten. One second. Source. This is good. This is good. Meta. Let's just delete the meta for a quick second.
And have to go inside row 9. So
Say
inside
it
the
again.
record. Does meta have to go inside the records? What you just
Possibly.
deleted.
Possibly. Let me just see if this query is working or not. So R returns a record, and from the record, I extract the last step. Let's just see if that works. That works. And if I just perhaps go ahead and write the meta, so actually,
Inside it can't reference R.
no, let's just do it this way. R, last R, expanded rows, and then meta, and then I'm going to say C equals to R, C equals to R. Let's see if that works. And then I'm going to call the last in here. Okay. Cool. Now, you can see that I have referenced the totals. And if I happen to click on the record, I get all the steps. I can pick up any step. So what I did was I just created a nested record, like a record inside of a record. If you want to understand, let me help you understand. So what I did was, after the let, I made a first step, and I called it R. And all the steps of the Power Query, I captured that within a record. This is the start of the record, the end of the record. Now, R, remember, R is nothing but the record. And from the record, I want to extract the last step of the query, which is nothing but this one. But once I've extracted the last step of the query, I also want to give a meta, and the meta is going to contain the R, and the R contains all of the steps. And that's it. And then you click on done. The query doesn't get disrupted, although you have lost the ability to write steps. So this is slightly more advanced. But if you just go back here, you have all the steps and you can reference any of the steps. Okay, I don't want you to go away. So I'm going to tell you an easier one, not like an easier trick. Okay, so please take a look at my last trick of the day. So let's just say, let me just go ahead and duplicate the data and reference other calls. All right, let's take a look at this. All right. So here is my query, and let me help you understand that what am I trying to do? Okay. What I want to do is I want to create a tag. I want to create a column, and the name of the column is going to be a tag column. So there is going to be a tag column. And the tag is going to tell me if the order is delayed or not. Simple as that. How do I find it out? You can see that the due date was 12th of April. It's 28th of March, order date. So hang on, let's just create a ship date first. So I'm gonna make a new column and I'm gonna create a ship date. And I will say date.add days, start the bracket, which is my due date, and add 20 days to that. Actually, add the order date and add 20 days to that. So order date and add 20 days to that. And that's my ship date. Now, what I want to do is I want to check if the order became due on the 12th of April and you're shipping it on the 17th of April, then obviously the order is delayed, right? So what I want to do is, I don't want the due date or the ship date column. I don't want any of these columns. I just want one single column, and that one single column is my DAG column. And that actually shows me either of the two things. It shows me a delay, or it shows me okay. That's it. And the check is based off the two dates, which is this particular date and this particular date. Now, I'm not saying that you don't know how to do that. Most of the people are going to write a new column, make an if condition, you're going to compare the dates, and then eventually at the end of the step, you're going to delete this column and you're going to delete this column, isn't it? Because you don't need the columns. So there is obviously 2 or 3 steps involved. Can we do that using a record? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Let's see how can we do that. Now, the general way of transforming a column or working on a column is by this particular function, table.transform columns. This is the formula that Power Query uses to work on any column, which is this column or this column or this column or this column, whatever column. But the problem with this particular function is that this function can only accept one column. Right now, my need is I want to compare 2 columns. I want to compare the ship date column and I want to compare the due date column. And the table.transform columns does not allow you to compare multiple columns. So I'm going to reverse this approach. And I'm going to say, hey, I don't want to transform the columns, but I want to transform the rows. So I will say table.transform rows instead. Where are you? Table.transform rows. So essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to go to the first row of the data. By the first row of the data, I mean to say first record of the data. When I'm taking a look at the first record, in the first record, I am not only going to have the name of the column, but also the value of the column, name of the column, and the value of the column. And I can literally go ahead and I can pick up these 2 values and do whatever with that value, isn't it? And that's the reason why I am choosing to go this way by transforming the records, not by transforming the columns, because I get access to multiple columns. Let's start. So I will say, hey, I want to transform the rows of a particular table. Then it asks me, hey, what table are you trying to work with? I'm trying to work with the table in the previous step. So I will just reference the previous step, which is added custom. Then I put in a comma. It says, hey, what is your transformation? What would you like to do in every single row? Right now, nothing. I don't want to do anything in the row. So I will say each and the underscore, each and underscore. And the each and the underscore is just going to give me the record. If I press enter, the table, which was like this in the previous step, has been transformed into a list with records. This is the first row of the table, the second row of the table, the third row of the table, so on and so forth. Right? Now I have the access to the record. I can do whatever with the record. So now I'm going to start to write my function. And I'm going to say something like, hey, I want to go ahead and I want to pick up the due date column. So due date column, and check if my due date is, let's say, if my ship date is greater than my due date. Due date. And I get a bunch of trues and falses. Everywhere it's greater, is it? This doesn't seem like a good company. They're doing a lot of delays. So yeah. Everywhere there is a delay. No, not here actually. This is the ship date is what is it? 6th of March. Yeah, it's a delay actually. Yeah, everywhere there's a delay. Nevertheless, we will work with the delays. It's not a good company. So everywhere I get a true, 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 true. Now I can go ahead and say, hey, if this particular condition, if this condition is a true condition, then I would want to write the word delay. Otherwise, I would want to write the word okay, and I press enter. Everywhere there's a delay. The problem is, I did not want to have this output. I wanted to have this as a column here in this table. So I lost the entire table and I just came up with one single answer, which is this answer. Not acceptable. Answer is right, but the output is not acceptable, isn't it? Stay with me. So right now, what I'm doing is I am just finding out the delay and OK, which is a single text. And I have lost the ability to take a look at the entire data, like all of this data and all of this data and all of this data, so on and so forth. So I can just go ahead and I know for the fact that once I did not do any of that, if I just cut it and I just go back to my normal query, the way that I wrote it, I got a record in every single query. So the first record, the second record, the third record. So I know the each and the underscore gives me a record, but I replace a record with my logic, then I get a single answer. This is something that I know. So I'm going to say, hey, I have two things that I want to marry. I want to marry the underscore, which is the record, which contains all the values. And I want to marry this particular logic. So concatenate the record with the delay or OK. That's what I'm trying to say. I press enter. This gives me an error. Why? Because the record is here and this is a text. A record cannot be concatenated with a text. Problem. Let's solve it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, OK, you're not working this way. Let me convert you into a record. This entire if, let me convert you into a record. And the record has got two parts. It has the name of the column. Let's just call this as my condition. Or let's just call this as tag. So here is my record tag. Here is the logic of the record. And here is my original record. Now, let's just see if that works. It works. So here is also a record. This is also a record. The concatenation happens all right. Now, if I just go inside of the record, I am going to get all of the columns, but also the delay. In the next step, all that I'm going to do is put this record back into a table. So I'm going to say, hey, table dot from records, start the bracket and close the bracket, press enter, and you are back with your table with the delay column. So all of that logic of if and all of that, we just did it in a single step. Now, in case you want to trim, a few columns from this, like due date and ship date, you can also do that by just altering the each and the underscore, and you'll be able to delete all of these columns that you don't need. But all of that happens in a single step, not multiple steps. Like the query doesn't get too verbose and too long. Okay, questions? I didn't quite catch that.
Isn't the worry that if you start using all these techniques, then maintainability of Power Query becomes worse, because you need to expect other developers to know?
Completely agree. I don't disagree to that. But there are clearly problems beyond the user interface. Right now, I have picked up the problems which are relatively easy, and you can convincingly solve these problems by just clicking the buttons. Agree. But there are several problems in Power Query with data cleaning that you just can't solve with the UI that is available to you right up on the top. This is very, very limited. And for all of those situations, you have no option left but to learn how this language works. So yeah, I mean, are you going to be writing code that other people cannot understand? Yes. What do you do? Write some notes, ask them to buy my book. That's it. But if the problem demands a more complicated solution, what you're going to do? You have to write the code to do that. To do that.
I was just going to ask, what about commenting?
Sure. The way you can comment is that you can right click on any particular step and you can click on the properties and then write the comment right here. And that actually gives you an icon here that the step has been commented. And you can just hover the mouse on top of that to be able to take a look at the comment for sure. And it's a good practice. I think you should do that. Yes, please.
My last one is, how would you summarize the record functionality? Would you visualize it as you're taking complicated logic and consolidating it into one form to do things you couldn't do before? You know, you kind of showed lots of different functions, but you haven't really said the real advantages.
I didn't quite get the question. Can you repeat that once again?
What would you say the real advantage is to creating the record? Would you describe it as you can consolidate multiple steps into one step in a way that you can't do otherwise?
Good question. I will propose that you break the steps into multiple steps for clarity, for sure. But if the formula sometimes gives you a native ability to do this thing in a single step, then you might as well use that. It just makes the query shorter that way. But if you are seeking clarity, there is a concept in Power Query called streaming. For some of you who are trying to think of performance issues, let me give you a way of thinking about it. It's a very fluid concept in my mind, but I'll try to make it clear. And how do you think about streaming? Imagine this is a dam, not D-A-M-N, but a dam where water flows through. And this dam is nothing but your Power Query. This is Power Query dam. And the water is coming and it's flowing through the dam. All of this water is coming and flowing through the dam. And the dam is standing right here. And this is all the dirty water or the dirty data. And it's coming and flowing through this. And this data is now clean. This is the clean data. Now, the thing is that if you have to think about streaming, the concept of streaming, think like this. In this particular dam, if you do an operation, which is nothing but your step, and the step requires all of the data to be read at once, then the query is going to slow down. Think of a step like, hey, I want to sort the data before I can clean it. So to be able to sort the data, all of this data, which is your water, needs to be collected in the query's engine. It needs to be read one by one, and then it needs to be arranged in a certain order. Only then the sorting can happen, and then you will have the clean data. Now, these steps will break the streaming of the query. By streaming, it means that the dirty data comes, it just hits the wall right here, gets cleaned, goes out. So any step in your query, which is inherently breaking the stream of the data and trying to gather all the data together, is going to break the stream of the query. And that is going to be a very costly operation, not things like coupling the steps or decoupling the steps.
Everyone, that's all the time we have. Chandeep, that was really good. Let's give Chandeep a round of applause, please.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I'm gonna send the file to Matthew, and then he can share the files with you if that is a thing that you do. But happy to share the file that I've used.
And send it as well, the link to your book. Very happy to send the link to everyone for to learn. So
Yes, yes, thanks.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
have it in the file, so you can just click on that and go and take a look at that book.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chandeep. So for everyone here, let's take a break, 15 minutes. If you want to go through the door, there's some pizza waiting for you. Chandeep will have some pizza next time you join us. Looking forward to
Yes,
that.
absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, guys. It's nighttime for me. I'm gonna take a sleep. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you again.
Bye. Bye.